Chapter 7. It's amazing how little respect is given for things and people who come for free. Yet businesses and relationships would fall apart without this free labour. Me, after a week at Miriwong. The commune dinner, I'd managed to put the lights up before it began. I turned them on and the tree looked great, though not lit up enough for Philippa. Luckily she didn't blame that on me. She was the one who chose the lights. The people were as follows. Marcel and Clement, the couple, who I got on with immediately. The head couple, Al and Connie, also French, also lovely. Basque Margarita, who was absent but was spoken about a lot. I think she held a high position. In what? I was about to find out. Another Spanish guy who was absent but spoken about, possibly with Margarita. A language teacher, Sue, from Canberra, who was here doing something with Indigenous language, even though she was white and wouldn't know how to speak it. She was a pleasant, woke, short-haired, big earrings woman. Pierre, Matt, a wide-eyed young skippy girl called Imogen, who hailed from Tasmania, but her parents bought the property next to Mirror Then they sold it. She'd been in a relationship with Aidan, Philippa's son, and had broken up with him but still lived here. And finally the absent son, Aidan, who I was nervous about meeting after working out what type of person Philippa is. Philippa at the communal dinner. To say she held court is an understatement. What should have been a pleasant evening saw Philippa telling us the toilets and the communal kitchen really needed cleaning. Quite a few other complaints and revs and general topics of conversation that no one wanted to reply to. When she finally loosened up and talked like a civilian instead of a sergeant, she said the following phrase: "This is the new earth we're trying to create here. A new world for the open-minded and unvaccinated." Holy fuck, I'm in a cult. The fortunate thing was anyone could see that no one here worshipped this woman, and they were all working outside the farm, bar myself, Connie, and Al. So that the only money they were throwing into the pot was their rent. There would be no way young Euro travellers would part with extra money for some bullshit salvation. And thank Goddess for that. Because if this was so, I'd have to skip to the beat of this weirdo's drum, or at least fake it, if I wanted to avoid the others pressuring me, excluding me, dobbing me in, or anything else that Philippa would potentially headfuck them into doing. Cults are full of the worst people. Stochastic terrorists who seem like airheaded simpletons who couldn't organise their way out of a paper bag. Everyone here seemed to have their own agency. And Matt. There was no fucking way this dude was going to be sucked into a cult. He wanted his own cult, sure, but he was too much of a kid. I was relieved he was here, despite him getting on my tits a bit. The night got more relaxed and the conversation was octagonal, or however many people made up the sides of the polyglot we were sitting in. Circular, more accurately. No one split off into their own convos. I haven't been in a group like that for a very long time. Sue, the Canberrian, initiated a lot of good topics for convos, and I could tell she had a good heart. Thank fuck, because two women my age who didn't like me would spell the end for me. I noticed that Connie and Al were very quiet. They had great English, so I don't think that was it. They'd been looking for work and couldn't find any, so money issues could have been a worry that prevented them from letting loose. I really hoped it wasn't ill treatment at the hands of Philippa. From what I'd seen, only on my first day, this wannabe cult leader really liked the power imbalance that free labour brings. And everyone was young, so she could wield her age, wisdom, and property-owning status over them. She could try that with me, but it'd be more difficult, although I would definitely have never admitted to her how much I was worth. This bitch is money hungry. The fact that I wasn't as naive as the others made me nervous. I'm already a threat. This could explain her cold treatment, or she just had no personality to give, unless there was something to be gained by being charming. Would I come to blows with this giant woman? Fuck, I hope not. For many reasons, besides her forbidding presence. I walked around the property a little more in the following days, without looking like I was casing the joint. I always felt guilty about shit like that, even though I'm no thief. I guess Philippa's chewed didn't help either. The place was like any other farm, littered with old machinery, but not farm machinery. There were a fuck ton of cars. They weren't wrecked though. They had been sitting put for a while. Station wagons, panel vans, all sorts of camping-sized vehicles. It was what was in the back that caught my attention. There were eskies, clothes, camping equipment, pots, pans, basically fully equipped to drive off and do the lap. I searched my mind for a safe, non-criminal explanation for this. I'd started to paint the inside of a caravan early the next morning after the communal dinner. I was feeling some work satisfaction and the place was looking rosier. This suspect car thing was not something I wanted to have to worry about. Maybe people left the country after Mirawong and Philippa or her son took advantage of a lot of desperate car sales. I would have thought Darwin or Broome would be the spots to leave from. After all, they had international airports. I imagined my van sitting among all these hibernating cars. It would stick out like dog's balls. A 30k van left to rust in the dust. I suppose they'd sell it, pay off some of Philippa's mortgage or whatever debt she was fretting about. There was a whole silly plan surrounding Philippa's mortgage that I had to nod, smile and agree with. Christ, my diplomacy and tact was at an all-time high. Maybe I subconsciously knew it was keeping me alive. The Bedford bus that I wasn't looking forward to painting next because of the filthy, fucked up state it was in was central to these plans. She was going to set up, wait for it, a sound healing studio. Think brass bowls sitting on a client's head, not for a bowl cut but for therapy. It's hit with a gong and the vibration is meant to cure your breast cancer or some shit. I'd been to a sound therapy workshop when I lived in the mountains. It was funny because the regional town nearby that it was held in was pretty conservative, so most women there were Cheryls and Vals, not Skies and Rivers. We all lay on the floor with our eyes closed while a white linen from top of her head to covered ankles tiptoed around the room, playing all sorts of unusual instruments that last got their day on the Sgt. Pepper's album. Sometimes it was a bit of a shock to cop a zither strum right near your head when you were least expecting it. This woman would have made a great thief. All that stuff is very pleasant and way nicer to experience than listening to beatless new age music, but when it's taken as a health measure, that's when the bullshit meter starts climbing. All that stuff is very pleasant and way nicer to experience than listening to beatless new age music, but when it's taken as a health measure, that's when the bullshit meter starts climbing. This sound healer didn't make ridiculous claims, so this was probably because it was too practical of an audience. There would have been nurses among them. Philippa held all of the personality traits that converged into the type of therapist who'd convince a breast cancer survivor on chemo to ditch it and let her hit her bowl-covered head with a soft gong-bashing stick. My satisfaction with the work I was doing was growing. In inverse proportion, my trust in Philippa was declining. I think she realized this, so she did something I didn't expect. She tried to platonically seduce me, and it almost worked. Her 50th birthday was coming up, and predictably she was going to make a big deal about the fact she'd been born onto the earth to grace us with her presence. Philippa had said that she didn't have many friends in Mirawong. She hung out with community women. If this was the case, either they didn't want to spend her birthday with her, or she was using the occasion to reel me in instead. I guess that was part of my free labour role. Be a friend to a woman who suffered from self-induced loneliness. It was a day off, so I agreed. We headed west, out of town along the way to the real Kimberleys, but not the ones you see on the brochures all the time. There were some springs that Philippa felt that she should bathe in on her birthday. Fine by me. It was all four-wheel drive tracks, so there was no way I was going to make that in my van. We arrived in the dirt car park after going on a pretty hairy dirt road. I loved that this was a semi-local knowledge-only kind of place, except it was filled with dry season tourists, so not really a secret. There were a few families with kids nearby as we sat in a very natural lukewarm pool that was more like a mountain stream. This was no naturally landscaped pools like Gorgetown and Mataranka. It was still quite beautiful. The reason I mention the kids is because we started in on an adults-only convo while we soaked. Philip had been married for most of her life, had raised 2 kids, one daughter still in high school in Sydney, private girls' school. I got an update on her financial position on the way home. It was a 50s cliche when her husband had an affair with a woman who worked for their company, a younger woman. So off he went. And in that natural way, Philippa had discovered what she'd been missing out on. She said she was never going back to monogamy. It's so ironic when this happens. The male is now stuck in a monogamous relationship and the ex-wife is free to try the promiscuity that the husband possibly wished for during the whole relationship. I told her my whole dating philosophy and history, even down to my predilection for black and brown men. I rattled off all my inclusions and exclusions and how I prefer them to be a bit novice in the sex department because it was my fetish. I could tell she didn't care that she had a son in my preferred age range. She wasn't that much of a boy mum. This was the first time Philippa had treated me like an equal, a peer. I slightly worried a little about her encouraging me to open up, so she could use that against me later in that cultish way where they get a confession of sins from followers. The thing is, I wasn't ashamed, so there was no danger of that. Philippa had revealed that she had a lover in Miriwong, though she didn't say who. That's fairly typical. She'd hold her cards to her chest so she could keep that power she held onto so tightly. I wondered if he was married, and I doubted Philippa would have scruples about that, even though she'd been in the cheated wife's position. She excitedly told me that she'd love to get another lover in Sydney and one in Alice Springs, and she'd be set. It's so sad when women feel they have to justify to themselves what males do all the time, or wish they could, if anyone wanted them in multiple towns and cities they visited for work. Record scratch for a minute. Why did Philippa pass through Alice Springs so much that she needed a regular lover? Sydney, I understood. She visited her daughter. Wouldn't she fly, not drive, to and back from Sydney? She was pretty tight with the community folks, according to her, but if she'd been an Indigenous art dealer, she would have for sure mentioned that, as it's the kind of thing she'd believe would bestow cred. I think Philippa just gave me a big glance at her cards. Not so smart after all. It isn't just interstate truckies who move meth to all the beaten-down country towns in Western and Central Australia. There are so many little people who drive the inland route between Adelaide and Darwin, or Sydney-Darwin, with gear packed into their unassuming car doors or wherever they put it. I didn't know. The only meth dealer I knew was Yvette, who I'd known since we were 21 and working in a photo lab together. We drifted apart as her drug habit and my alcohol habit both got worse in our 30s. I ran into her at the Rocks in Sydney one day. I saw this beautiful woman dressed very groovily, talking to some ibis who were hassling her for food. That was my Yvette. She was waiting to see a woman who owned an art gallery. It wasn't about art, even though she was an amazing photographer in days gone by. I went back to her apartment for the first time in my life. She didn't hide her habit. She intravenously injected meth in front of me and didn't change one bit afterwards. Yvette was almost born to take drugs. I was, and had always been, in love with her. But she was as bad habit for me as drugs were for her. She tried to hook up a meeting between me and a piece of shit male who ran her after I told her that I'd love to do a story writing project. He did indeed make documentaries, but he used Yvette to move his drugs as well as using her talent behind the lens. I guessed but did not know. I knew that this setup would have been an actual setup for something not cool and artistic. This prick got her into meth after her years of coke addiction. That I knew. The first time I met him at her apartment was the first time I'd seen Yvette on meth. Yvette certainly never needed to move drugs on the road. Her clientele were all Sydney's beautiful people, so at least she'd be safe from jail for a while. I cried when I realised I could never stay in contact with her. So I could imagine Philippa completely ignoring the fact that she was just as bad for communities as racists were, in that delusional self-aggrandizing way of a cult leader. It's cultural genocide to put meth in little towns that were already struggling with alcohol. How I'd love to know for sure and challenge the stupid bitch and her hypocrisy. I thought of all the empty cars and decided that wouldn't be wise either. Despite all this, I was warming Philippa up like I'm good at. It's not even faking it. If someone is a terrible person but they are responding well to my conversation, I can immerse in it. And I did. This must be what it's like to be Philippa's friend. She's pretty entertaining. I was enjoying myself. Philippa had said earlier on the trip here, people in town don't like me. I just hung out with my community friends. I wondered about Sue, the language teacher. I'd seen her give her a bottle of expensive liquor from Broome to Philippa for her birthday. The way she was almost bowing and scraping to her was a little hard to watch. What was Sue then? Chopped liver? I love that expression. Thanks for being a part of it. Sue was no challenge, I guess. That must mean that I was, hence the sudden warming to me. Amongst the bonhomie, the real Philippa still shone through. I was filming the beautiful water with my GoPro and she asked me to take a pic of her. She set it up with her hands in the water, creatively directing me. I had to take a few. Everyone has to do her bidding. The next stop we went to was El Questro, a glamorized caravan and cabin resort that was only accessible by four-wheel drive. It was a nice setting, and we sat and chatted over food. Philippa didn't shout my food, but what the hey. This is when we really got into the deep stuff. I found myself talking about my family. Then I found myself crying. This shocked me even. Philippa actually became human for a second, so I didn't regret it. She said, "Oh, you poor thing." It was sympathy, but it was also a pity which she'd reserved for those who cry. She started to describe her relationship with her own daughter, and it didn't sound too good. I know the girl was still a teenager, but I found myself seeing my own mother-daughter relationship that she had with her daughter. Okay, moment of weakness over. It was necessary to stay on guard with this narcissist, particularly after what I learned next.